billionaire's life was built on suspicion. In his world, everyone had a price, every smile had a motive, and every act of kindness usually came with a hidden agenda. So when he accidentally left behind a briefcase containing $100,000 in cash, he expected one thing, that the money would disappear forever. But then a struggling single mother walked into his office, placed the briefcase on his desk, and quietly said she had found it. She didn't ask for a reward. She didn't explain her situation. She simply returned the money and walked away as if doing the right thing had cost her nothing. But the billionaire noticed what she tried to hide: the worn-out shoes, the tired eyes, the trembling hands, and the child waiting outside with a school bag far too old for his age. Something about her honesty disturbed him. Why would a woman who clearly needed money return a fortune that could have changed her life overnight? Why did she look more afraid than proud? And why did she refuse even the smallest thank you? Unable to let it go, the billionaire made a decision that would change both of their lives. Without revealing himself, he secretly followed her home. What he discovered behind the walls of her tiny apartment left him speechless. Her life was far harder than he had imagined. Yet what shocked him most was not her poverty, it was what she did when she thought no one was watching. In that moment, the billionaire realized he had not just met an honest woman. He had met someone with a secret so powerful, so heartbreaking, and so unimaginable that it would force him to question everything he believed about wealth, sacrifice, and the true meaning of humanity. Before we continue, what would you have done if you found $100,000 and no one was watching? Would you return it, keep it, or hesitate for just one moment? Share your honest thoughts in the comments, because this story may change the way you look at kindness forever. And if you enjoy emotional, powerful stories filled with suspense, life lessons, and unexpected twists, please subscribe. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and turn on notifications for more interesting stories like this. The billionaire's name was Adrian Vale, and people in the city spoke of him the way they spoke of winter storms: powerful, cold, impossible to stop, and better admired from a distance. He owned hotels that touched the clouds, factories that ran through the night, shipping companies that crossed oceans, and private offices where even the marble floors seemed too polished for ordinary feet. His face had appeared on magazine covers, business panels, charity galas, and financial reports. To the world, Adrian Vale was success carved into a man. But those who worked close to him knew something else. He never trusted anyone. He had not always been that way. There had been a time, long before the tailored suits and private elevators, when Adrian believed in loyalty. There had been a time when he believed a handshake meant something, when a promise was not just a sound people made until it became inconvenient. That time had ended 20 years earlier, on a rainy Thursday evening, when his father lost everything. Adrian had been 17 then, standing barefoot in the hallway of a small rented house, listening to his mother cry behind a closed bedroom door while his father sat at the kitchen table staring at a stack of papers. The papers were not thick, but they were heavy enough to crush a family. A trusted business partner had betrayed his father, emptied the accounts, forged signatures, and disappeared. The next morning, Adrian's father put on his only suit and walked to every bank in town. By sunset, he came home older than when he left. No one helped him. No one gave him time. No one cared that he had 2 children and a wife whose hands shook whenever the phone rang. That was the first lesson Adrian learned about money. The second came a year later, after his father died from a heart that had been broken long before it stopped beating. From that day on, Adrian made a promise to himself. He would become so rich that no one could ever destroy him. He would become so powerful that no one could ever betray him without paying for it. Most importantly, he would never again mistake kindness for goodness. Because in Adrian's mind, goodness was usually just selfishness wearing clean clothes. So when he met the woman who returned the briefcase, something inside him became restless. Her name, he later learned, was Mara Bennett. But at first, she was simply the woman in the grey coat. That morning had started like any other in Adrian's world. His driver arrived at exactly 6:45. His coffee was waiting in the back seat. His assistant had sent 3 schedules before sunrise, all color-coded and revised twice. At 8:10, he entered the Vale Industries Tower through a private entrance, where security guards straightened their posture as if the building itself had suddenly become alert. The briefcase had not been ordinary. Adrian had carried it himself because he was finalizing a confidential purchase involving a piece of waterfront property. The cash was not the whole deal, only a gesture demanded by an old landowner who distrusted banks and preferred proof he could hold in his hands. Adrian considered the man foolish. Yet by noon, Adrian became the fool. A series of urgent calls distracted him, a legal emergency, a delayed inspection, a board member threatening to resign unless a certain decision was reversed. In the chaos, Adrian left the briefcase in a quiet lounge beside the public lobby, a place he rarely entered and had no reason to revisit. He realized it was missing 43 minutes later. By then, his security team had already checked cameras. They saw the briefcase sitting alone. They saw dozens of people pass. Then they saw a woman pause. She had a child with her, a boy perhaps 8 or 9. He pointed at the case first. The woman looked around, hesitated, then picked it up. The footage ended there. Adrian watched it twice, without blinking. "Find her," he said. His head of security, Mr. Cole, nodded. "We can track her through the exterior cameras." "No," Adrian said sharply. Cole paused. Adrian did not know why he stopped him. Maybe he wanted to see how the story ended on its own. Maybe he expected the woman to disappear into the city and confirm everything he already believed. Maybe, deep down, he wanted her to disappoint him quickly so he could return to being right about the world. "Wait," Adrian said. "Give it an hour." Cole looked surprised, but he obeyed. 56 minutes later, the woman returned. Not to the public lobby, not to security, not to reception. Somehow, after asking 3 employees and waiting through 2 awkward explanations, she ended up outside Adrian Vale's private office, holding the briefcase like it weighed more than money. Adrian had been standing behind his glass desk when his assistant entered. "There's a woman here," she said carefully. "She says she found something that belongs to you." Adrian looked up. When Mara Bennett stepped inside, the office seemed to swallow her. Everything around her was too large, too expensive, too cold. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling. The furniture was black leather and steel. Even the silence felt polished. She held the briefcase with both hands. "I believe this is yours," she said. Her voice was soft, but not weak. Adrian did not move immediately. He watched her face. Most people looked around his office with hunger or fear. Mara looked only at the briefcase. "Did you open it?" he asked. Her eyes flickered. "Yes." "Then you knew what was inside?" "Yes." "And still you brought it back." She placed it on his desk. "It wasn't mine." That answer irritated him more than a lie would have. No excuses, no performance, no speech about morality, just 4 words, clean and simple. "It wasn't mine." Adrian opened the case. The money was untouched. He looked at her hands. They were trembling, but she tried to hide it by clasping them in front of her. Her coat was missing a button. Her shoes were cracked near the soles. A small stain marked the cuff of her sleeve, the kind made by washing something too many times because replacement was not an option. Then he noticed the boy through the glass wall outside his office. He was sitting beside Adrian's assistant, clutching an old school bag with a broken zipper. He did not touch anything. He barely moved. His eyes kept drifting toward his mother. "What's your name?" Adrian asked. "Mara's." "Last name?" She hesitated. "Bennett." "Where did you find it?" "In the lobby lounge." "Why were you in my building?" Mara took a breath. "I clean offices at night in the building across the street. My son had a half day at school. I came early to ask about a day position here." Adrian's eyes narrowed. You were applying for work. Yes. With $100,000 in your hands. She gave a small, tired smile that vanished almost immediately. That money would have solved some problems. It would have created bigger ones. That sentence stayed with him. He reached for his checkbook. I can reward you. No, thank you. He paused. You haven't heard the amount. I didn't return it for a reward. Everyone wants something. For the first time, she looked directly at him. Her eyes were darker than he expected, not cold, but guarded, as if life had taught her not to leave her heart where strangers could step on it. Maybe, she said, but not always money. Then she turned to leave. Adrian stood there, holding the pen, feeling something unfamiliar rise in his chest. It was not gratitude. It was not guilt. It was curiosity sharpened into suspicion. Mara, he called. She stopped at the door. If you need a job, my assistant can arrange an interview. Her fingers tightened on the door handle. For one brief second, hope crossed her face, then fear chased it away. I appreciate that, she said, but I can't. Why not? She looked through the glass at her son, because some jobs cost more than they pay. Before Adrian could ask what that meant, she walked out. That should have been the end of it. For any normal man, it would have been enough. A lost briefcase returned, a poor woman refusing a reward, a small mystery swallowed by a large city. But Adrian Vale was not normal. He had built his empire by noticing what others ignored, a pause in negotiation, a number hidden in a footnote, a secretary's expression before a merger collapsed. He did not believe in coincidences, and Mara Bennett was full of them. She needed money, but refused it. She needed work, but walked away from opportunity. She was honest, but terrified. And when she said some jobs cost more than they pay, Adrian had seen something in her face that reminded him of his father at the kitchen table all those years ago. Not sadness, not weakness. A person trapped by a debt they had not chosen. By late afternoon, rain had begun falling against the tower windows. Adrian stood on the 42nd floor, looking down at the street. People moved below him like dark dots beneath umbrellas. Somewhere among them, Mara Bennett was disappearing back into the city. He told himself to forget her. Instead, he picked up his coat. Mr. Cole saw him near the private elevator. Sir, I'm going out. Would you like the car brought around? No. Cole blinked. Adrian Vale did not walk through the city in the rain. He did not leave without a driver. He did not go anywhere without telling security. Sir, is everything all right? Adrian's answer was already a lie before he spoke it. Perfectly. He took a service exit and stepped into the rain. For the first few minutes, he felt ridiculous. The city smelled of wet pavement and exhaust. His shoes were not made for puddles. His coat, though expensive, did nothing against the cold wind slipping between buildings. He spotted Mara half a block away. She held her son's hand and walked quickly, head lowered. The boy skipped once to avoid a puddle, then immediately slowed, as if remembering he was supposed to save his energy. Mara noticed and pulled him closer under her umbrella, though it was too small for both of them. Adrian followed from a distance. He expected her to take a bus. She did. He boarded through the rear door, keeping his face turned toward the window. No one recognized him. That surprised him. In his tower, people treated him like a king. On the bus, he was simply a man taking up space. Mara and her son sat near the front. Mom, the boy whispered, though Adrian could not hear every word over the engine. Mara bent toward him. The boy said something that made her shake her head gently. He looked disappointed, but not surprised. At the next stop, an elderly woman climbed aboard with 2 grocery bags. No seats were open. Before anyone else moved, Mara stood and guided her son onto her lap so the woman could sit. Adrian watched. It was such a small thing, so ordinary, so unprofitable, yet it bothered him. His father had once stood on a bus for an old man. Adrian remembered being 7, holding onto his father's sleeve, asking why he gave up the seat when he was tired from work. His father had smiled and said, "Because being tired doesn't excuse us from being decent." Adrian had not thought of that sentence in years. Mara got off after 11 stops, in a neighborhood Adrian had never visited except from behind tinted windows. The buildings leaned close together. Laundry hung from windows despite the rain. A corner store flickered with a half-broken sign. Somewhere a dog barked, and somewhere else music played faintly behind thin walls. Mara's apartment building stood at the end of a narrow street. The front steps were cracked. The entrance light buzzed. Someone had taped cardboard over a broken panel beside the mailboxes. Adrian stopped beneath the shadow of a closed bakery across the street and watched her unlock the door. Before she entered, she looked over her shoulder. Adrian stepped back just in time. Her face was not suspicious. It was afraid. That single glance changed everything. He waited a minute, then crossed the street. The building door had not fully latched. He entered quietly and found himself in a dim hallway smelling of old paint, damp coats, and boiled cabbage. He hated himself for being there, yet he kept going. Mara's footsteps had stopped on the 3rd floor. Adrian climbed slowly. At the landing, he heard voices. Mara's door was slightly open. A warm strip of yellow light cut across the hallway floor. Adrian knew he should leave. He had invaded enough. He had no right to stand there, no right to listen. Then he heard the boy say, "Are we going to be okay?" Adrian froze. Mara answered after a long pause, "Yes, Eli, we're going to be okay." Children, Adrian thought, could hear lies better than adults. "Did the man give you money?" Eli asked. "No." "Why not?" "Because I didn't ask for any." "But we need it." "I know." "Then why didn't you?" There was silence, not empty silence, heavy silence, the kind that fills a room when truth stands at the door but no one wants to let it in. Finally Mara said, "Because sometimes, sweetheart, the way out of trouble matters just as much as getting out." Adrian felt something tighten in his throat. He turned to leave. That was when another voice spoke from inside the apartment. A man's voice. "You should have taken it." Adrian stopped cold. The voice was low, rough, controlled. Not loud, but dangerous in the way quiet men can sometimes be. Mara said, "You shouldn't be here. And you shouldn't be making stupid choices." Adrian moved closer without thinking. Through the narrow opening, he saw only part of the room, a small table, a faded couch, a pot on the stove, Eli standing near his mother, and a man in a dark jacket leaning against the wall as if he owned the air. Mara stepped in front of Eli. "I told you," she said, "I'll get the money. You had it in your hands. It wasn't mine." The man laughed softly. "Honesty, that's sweet. Does your landlord accept honesty? Does the hospital, do I?" Adrian's eyes sharpened. "Hospital?" Mara's shoulders stiffened. "I made a payment last week." "Not enough. I need more time." "You're out of time." Eli clutched his mother's sleeve. The man noticed and smiled. "Relax, kid, I'm not here for you." Mara's voice lowered. "Don't speak to him. Then listen carefully. Tomorrow night, same place, same amount, or the arrangement changes." "What arrangement?" "You know exactly what arrangement." Mara looked as if the floor had shifted beneath her. The man walked to the door. Adrian moved backward into the shadow of the stairwell just before it opened fully. The man stepped into the hallway, adjusted his collar, and walked down the stairs whistling. Adrian waited until the footsteps faded. Inside the apartment, Mara closed the door. A lock turned, then another. A minute later, Adrian heard something that followed him long after he left. Mara crying, without making a sound. Back in his penthouse that night, Adrian did not sleep. The city glittered outside his windows, all steel and light, but he saw only the narrow hallway, the cracked door, the boy's frightened face, and Mara standing between her child and a threat she could not afford to anger. He poured a drink and did not touch it. At midnight, he called Mr. Cole. "I need information on Mara Bennett." Cole did not ask why, how deep. "Everything." By morning, the file was on Adrian's desk. It was thinner than expected, but every page felt heavier than the last. Mara Bennett, 32, widowed, former nursing student, no criminal record, multiple part-time jobs over the past 7 years, one child. Elijah Bennett, age 8, husband Daniel Bennett, deceased, cause of death, workplace accident at a manufacturing plant that had since changed ownership twice. Adrian turned the page. Medical debt, rent arrears, unpaid hospital bills connected not to Mara, but to Eli. Adrian read the line twice. Eli Bennett had a rare heart condition, treatable but expensive. There had been surgeries, evaluations, medications, specialist visits, payment plans, insurance denials, charity applications, and appeals. Mara had fought through all of them like a woman trying to hold back an ocean with her bare hands. Then came the name of the man in the apartment. Victor Harlan. Adrian knew that name. He did not know him personally, but he knew the type. Private lender, quiet collector, legal enough to survive, dirty enough to frighten people. Victor operated in the gray spaces where desperate people signed papers they did not fully understand because their children needed help before morning. Mara had borrowed from him 18 months earlier, after Eli's emergency treatment. The original loan was $12,000. With penalties, fees, and impossible interest, Victor now claimed she owed almost $75,000. Adrian loaned back. The number was obscene, but it was not the part that made his blood run cold. At the bottom of Cole's report was a note. Victor Harlan had recently been linked to a shell company attempting to buy properties in Mara's neighborhood. Tenants who could not pay were pressured into signing relocation agreements. Several families had left. One building had already been emptied. Adrian read the next line slowly. The property developer behind the shell company was one of Vale Industries' silent partners. For a long moment, Adrian did not breathe. The room seemed to tilt. This was how the world worked. Money moved through clean hands, then dirty hands, then clean hands again, until no one could tell where responsibility began. Adrian had spent years mastering that distance. He signed deals, others handled consequences. He acquired land, others persuaded tenants. He funded expansions, others created pressure. He had always told himself that business was business. But now a woman who had returned his $100,000 was being crushed by a machine that may have been turning with his money. And she had no idea. That afternoon, Adrian did something he had not done in 15 years. He visited the old house where he grew up. It was no longer his family's. The porch had been rebuilt. The paint was blue instead of white. A bicycle lay in the yard, but the street was the same. The tree near the corner was taller now, its branches stretching over the sidewalk like memory itself. He parked across the road and sat in silence. He remembered his mother sewing buttons back onto his school shirt because they could not afford new ones. He remembered pretending not to hear the landlord knock. He remembered the night his father sold his watch and told the family he had lost it. Most of all, he remembered the anger. That anger had become ambition. Ambition had become wealth. Wealth had become armor. But armor, he realized, could become a cage if worn too long. His phone rang. It was Cole. "Sir, Harlan is moving faster than expected." Adrian's hand tightened on the steering wheel, meaning, "He's scheduled to meet Mrs. Bennett tonight." "Where's?" A diner on Palmer Street, closed for renovation. He uses the back office. Adrian looked at the old house one last time. I'll be there. Sir, I strongly recommend. I said I'll be there. When Adrian arrived at Palmer Street, the rain had returned. It fell softly this time, turning the pavement black and glossy beneath the streetlights. The diner looked abandoned, its windows covered with newspaper and tape. A neon sign hung dead above the door. Mara arrived at 8:17. She wore the same grey coat. Adrian watched from his car, parked half a block away. She stood outside the diner for several seconds before going in. Her face was pale. In one hand, she held an envelope. Adrian felt a sudden, irrational urge to stop her. But he needed to know. Inside, the diner was dim. Through a gap in the window covering, Adrian could see shapes moving. Victor Harlan sat at a booth near the back, calm as a man ordering dinner. Adrian slipped through the side entrance Cole had identified earlier and moved into a hallway beside the kitchen. Years of boardroom negotiations had trained him to listen without being seen. Mara's voice came first. I have $600. Victor chuckled, that's adorable. It's all I could get. You were standing in front of a billionaire yesterday. I told you I returned the money. And I told you that was stupid. It was right. Right doesn't pay debt. No, Mara said quietly, but wrong takes more than money. Victor's chair scraped against the floor. You think you're better than people who survive however they can. No. Then what do you think? I think my son watches me. That answer struck Adrian like a hand to the chest. Victor said nothing for a moment. Then his voice hardened. Sign the transfer. What transfer? The apartment you'll vacate voluntarily, no court, no delay, no noise. I can't do that. You can. My son is recovering, his school is nearby, his doctor. Not my problem. Mara's voice shook, please. The word was small. Adrian hated it. He hated hearing it because he remembered his mother saying it to bank managers, landlords, men in suits who never looked her in the eye. Victor slid something across the table. Sign. No. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. No, Victor repeated. No, Mara said again, and this time her voice was stronger. I borrowed money to keep my child alive. I have paid you more than I borrowed. I have worked nights, mornings, weekends. I have gone without meals. I have sold my wedding ring. I have done everything except become the kind of person who lets fear make every decision. I'm not signing away our home. Adrian closed his eyes. Her wedding ring. The report had mentioned no jewelry, no assets, no savings. Of course, it had not mentioned what grief costs when sold quietly across a counter. Victor laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think a speech changes paperwork? No, but neither does bullying. Adrian opened his eyes. Something was happening to him, something he did not fully understand. For years, he had admired strength only when it looked like power. Contracts, control, leverage, victory, but Mara Bennett had none of those things. She had $600 in an envelope and a coat missing a button. Yet in that room, she was braver than he had ever been. Victor stood. Adrian stepped out of the hallway. That's enough, he said. Both of them turned. Mara's face went white, Mr. Vale. Victor's expression changed from annoyance to calculation. Men like Victor did not fear morality, but they respected money. Adrian Vale, Victor said smoothly, this is unexpected. Not as unexpected as what my legal team will find when they examine your lending practices. Victor's smile tightened. This is a private matter. Not anymore. Mara looked between them, confused and horrified. You followed me. Adrian did not answer quickly enough. Her eyes filled with something worse than anger. Disappointment. You followed me, she said again. Adrian felt heat rise in his face. I was concerned. No, she said, you were curious. The words landed harder because they were true. Victor picked up the papers. This conversation is over. It is, Adrian said, but not in the way you think. He took a step closer. I know about the shell company. I know about the properties. I know about the silent partner. By morning, every document tied to this operation will be reviewed by attorneys who are much more patient than I am. And if I find one forged fee, one illegal threat, one manipulated contract, I will bury you in court until even your shadow needs a lawyer. Victor stared at him. For the first time, the man looked uncertain. You don't want this fight, he said. Adrian's voice lowered. That is the difference between us. I can afford it. Victor left without another word. The door closed behind him, and the diner became painfully quiet. Mara turned to Adrian. For 1 second, he expected gratitude. He should have known better. How dare you, she whispered. Adrian stood still. I can explain. You followed me to my home, you listened at my door, you investigated my life. I was trying to help. You were trying to understand something that made you uncomfortable. Again, true. Mara grabbed her envelope from the table. Rich people always think help means taking control. That's not what You could have asked. Adrian had no answer. You could have treated me like a person instead of a mystery. She walked past him. Mara. She stopped near the door but did not turn around. I didn't know my company was connected to this. That must be nice, she said, not knowing what your money does until it knocks on someone else's door. Then she left. Adrian remained in the diner long after she was gone. For the first time in years, he had won the confrontation and still felt defeated. The next morning, the city woke to headlines Adrian had not yet caused, but soon would. He ordered a full internal audit of every partner involved in the neighborhood redevelopment plan. His executives reacted with polite panic. Meetings were delayed. Phones rang non-stop. Lawyers appeared with folders. One senior vice president tried to convince Adrian that such arrangements were common, that aggressive acquisition strategies were standard, that every major company used intermediaries. Adrian listened. Then he fired him. By noon, Vale Industries withdrew from the project. By 2, Adrian's attorneys filed complaints against Victor Harlan's lending network. By 4, 2 shell companies dissolved so quickly that it practically confirmed guilt. But none of that solved the one problem Adrian could not stop thinking about. Mara Bennett wanted nothing from him. He sent an apology letter. It came back unopened. He sent flowers. They were returned with a note, please don't. He arranged through a charitable foundation to cover medical bills for several children, including Eli, without naming Mara. She discovered it anyway and refused the portion attached to her son. The foundation director called Adrian nervously. She said to give it to another child. Adrian sat in silence. So, did she say anything else? Yes. What? She said her son is not a lesson for a billionaire. Adrian leaned back and almost smiled, though it hurt. Mara Bennett was impossible. And because she was impossible, he could not forget her. Weeks passed. Adrian tried returning to normal. He attended meetings, closed deals, gave speeches, and sat through charity dinners where wealthy people applauded themselves for giving away amounts they would never miss. But the applause sounded hollow now. Every time someone praised his generosity, he remembered Mara's face in the diner. You could have treated me like a person instead of a mystery. One evening, Adrian visited one of his luxury hotels for a surprise inspection. In the lobby, he saw a young employee quietly slip leftover, packaged meals into a bag. The old Adrian would have fired him. The new Adrian watched. "Who are those for?" he asked. The employee froze. "Sir, I." "Answer." The young man swallowed. "There's a shelter 2 blocks away. Kitchen closes early. We throw away so much food." Adrian looked at the bag. For years he had demanded efficiency. Waste was a number on a report. People were not part of the equation unless they were customers, employees, or liabilities. "Take them," he said. The employee blinked. "Sir." "Take them tonight. Tomorrow speak with management. We'll create a proper donation system." The young man's face changed with relief. Adrian walked away before he could be thanked. That was the first crack. Then came another. He stopped a contract that would have replaced long-term tenants with luxury units unless relocation support was guaranteed. He increased wages for cleaning staff after realizing some worked second jobs and still could not afford rent. He ordered transparent reviews of debt collection vendors tied to his companies. His board was furious. Investors became nervous. Business magazines began asking whether Adrian Vale had gone soft. But the strangest thing happened. For the first time in years, Adrian slept. Not well, not peacefully, but enough. Then, one cold morning in December, Mara returned to his building. Adrian was not expecting her. His assistant entered his office with a careful expression. "Mrs. Bennett is here." Adrian stood so quickly, his chair rolled backward. "Send her in." Mara walked in wearing a dark blue sweater beneath her old coat. She looked tired, as always, but not defeated. Eli stood beside her, holding a folder against his chest. Adrian looked at the boy. Eli looked back with serious eyes. Mara spoke first. "He wanted to thank you." Adrian frowned. "For what?" She lifted her chin. "Don't pretend." "I'm not." The hospital review, the charity board, the anonymous correction to his billing account. Adrian hesitated. "It wasn't charity," he said. "Your insurance appeal was mishandled. The hospital had a fund it failed to apply properly. My foundation only helped investigate." Mara studied him. "That sounds like something a lawyer taught you to say." "It's also true." Eli stepped forward and opened the folder. Inside was a drawing. It showed a tall building, a small apartment, and between them a bridge made of yellow lines. On one side stood a woman and a boy. On the other stood a man in a black suit. Above them, in careful handwriting, Eli had written, "Thank you for making the scary man go away." Adrian stared at the drawing. Something inside him went very still. He had received awards made of crystal, gold, silver, polished stone. None had ever made him unable to speak. "It's very good," he said finally. Eli nodded solemnly. "Mom said I had to give it to you even if she's still mad." "Eli," Mara warned. Adrian almost laughed. Mara sighed. "I'm not here to restart anything. I'm here because my son asked me to be fair." Adrian looked at her. "And are you?" "Trying." "So am I." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Adrian said, "I owe you an apology, not the kind written by assistants, a real one." Mara's expression remained guarded. "I followed you because I did not understand your honesty," he continued. "That says more about me than about you. I invaded your privacy, and I justified it by calling it concern. I was wrong." Mara looked down. Eli glanced between them, sensing the importance of the moment without understanding all of it. "I accept your apology," Mara said. Adrian nodded once. "Thank you. But accepting it doesn't mean I trust you." "I know. And it doesn't mean you get to fix my life." "I know. Do you?" Adrian almost answered too quickly, then he stopped. "Did he?" All his life he had fixed problems by overpowering them, buying them, firing them, suing them, outmaneuvering them, but people were not broken machines. A life was not a company. A wound was not a transaction. I'm learning, he said. Mara seemed surprised by the honesty. Eli tugged her sleeve. Can we go now? In a minute. Adrian looked at the boy. Would you like to see the city from the top floor? Eli's eyes widened. Mara immediately said, we shouldn't. It's just a view, Adrian said. She hesitated. Eli whispered, please. Mara closed her eyes briefly, defeated by the oldest force known to parents, a child asking with hope. 5 minutes, she said. The private elevator carried them upward in silence. Eli watched the numbers climb, his mouth slightly open. When the doors opened to the observation level, he rushed to the window and pressed both hands against the glass. Mom, he breathed, everything looks tiny. Mara smiled. Adrian watched her smile and realized he had never seen it fully before. It changed her face completely. The tiredness remained, but light moved through it. My dad used to bring me to rooftops, Adrian said, before he knew he intended to speak. Mara looked at him. He didn't own any, Adrian added. He repaired heating systems. Sometimes he took me when a building manager allowed it. Eli turned. Was he rich? No. Did he become rich? Adrian looked out over the city. No. Eli considered this. Were you sad? Yes. Mara's expression softened just a little. What happened to him? Eli asked. Eli, Mara said gently. It's all right, Adrian said. He trusted someone he shouldn't have. It cost him everything. Eli frowned, like Mr. Harlan. In a way. Did someone help him? Adrian's reflection stared back from the glass. No, he said, no one did. Eli was quiet for a moment. Then he said, that's probably why you helped us. Adrian turned. The child said it without accusation, without strategy, without understanding the deep place his words had reached. Children sometimes open doors adults spent decades locking. Mara looked at Adrian and saw something shift in his face. For the first time, she did not look away. That should have been the turning point. But life rarely changes in a single beautiful moment. It changes, then tests the change. It opens a door, then sends a storm to see whether you will close it again. The storm came 3 nights later. Adrian received the call at 2:03 in the morning. It was Mara. He sat up immediately. What happened? For a second, all he heard was breathing. Then Mara said, Eli collapsed. Adrian was already out of bed. Where are you? St. Catherine's Hospital. I'm coming. No, she said quickly, that's not why I called. Then why? Another pause. Because they're saying the specialist isn't available until morning, but I heard you funded the cardiac wing. I thought maybe, her voice broke, but only slightly. I thought maybe you knew someone. Adrian closed his eyes. She had not called for money. She had called because her son needed a door opened. I'll handle it, he said. 20 minutes later, Adrian entered the hospital through the emergency wing. He had donated millions to the place, but that night, the plaques on the wall meant nothing. Wealth could build rooms, but it could not promise what happened inside them. He found Mara in a waiting area under fluorescent lights. She looked smaller than before. Not weak, never weak. Just terrified in a way no parent should ever have to be. He's conscious, she said before he could ask. They're monitoring him. They said it might be complications or stress or medication. They don't know. Adrian nodded. Dr. Levin is on his way. Mara stared. At this hour? Yes. How? I asked. She almost laughed, but it came out like a sob. Of course you did. They sat side by side without speaking. Across from them, a vending machine hummed. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang. A nurse walked past carrying blankets. Time moved strangely in hospitals, stretching every minute until fear had room to grow. Adrian remembered another hospital corridor. He had been 18, sitting beside his mother after his father's final collapse. A doctor had explained things with careful kindness, using words Adrian barely heard. His mother kept asking whether more could be done. The doctor kept saying they had tried. Adrian had hated that word. Tried. It was what people said when hope had been dismissed from the room. Mara's hands were clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. Adrian wanted to say something comforting. He knew nothing that would not sound cheap. So he sat there. After an hour, Dr. Levin arrived, followed by a small team. He spoke with Mara, reviewed charts, examined Eli, ordered tests, adjusted medication, and explained possibilities with calm precision. Mara listened to every word as if memorizing a map through a burning building. At dawn, the doctor returned. He's stable, he said. Mara covered her mouth. Adrian looked away. The doctor continued. We need to monitor him closely, but the immediate danger has passed. Mara nodded, unable to speak. When she finally saw Eli, he was pale but awake. Adrian stayed in the hall. Through the glass, he saw Mara sit beside her son and take his hand. Eli said something. Mara laughed through tears. Adrian felt relief, so intense it frightened him. He realized then that caring about people was a terrible weakness, and also the only thing that made strength worth having. By morning, Mara found him near the chapel, though he had not entered it. You stayed, she said. Yes. You didn't have to. I know. She leaned against the wall, exhausted. I was angry when I called you, she admitted. Angry that I needed your help. Angry that money makes some people wait and others get answers. Angry that my pride disappeared the second my son needed something. Adrian said nothing. But I'm grateful, she added. He looked at her. The words seemed to cost her something, but she gave it anyway. Thank you, she said. Adrian nodded. You're welcome. Mara glanced toward Eli's room. He asked if you could visit later. Me? He says you look lonely. Adrian almost smiled. Your son is very direct. He gets that from life. For the next several weeks, Adrian visited the hospital more often than he admitted to anyone. At first, always with a reason, documents to sign, a board meeting nearby, a conversation with the foundation director. Eventually, the reasons became unnecessary. Eli showed him drawings. Mara brought coffee from the cheap cafeteria and insisted Adrian drink it instead of sending someone out for something better. Adrian pretended it was terrible, but he drank every cup. Slowly, carefully, trust grew. Not like lightning. Like a plant in poor soil, stubbornly finding light. Mara told him about Daniel, her husband, not all at once. Pieces came slowly. Daniel had loved old cars, terrible jokes, and singing off-key while cooking breakfast. He had worked overtime at a plant because Eli's first medical bills had arrived before they even understood the diagnosis. He had died in an accident that the company called unavoidable and Mara called neglected. Adrian listened. One night she said, after Daniel died, everyone said I was strong. I hated that. They said it like strength was a gift. It was what was left when no one came. Adrian understood too well. He told her about his father, about the betrayal, about the kitchen table, about the promise he had made to become untouchable. Mara looked at him for a long time. And did it work? Adrian almost said yes. Then he thought of his penthouse, his empty dining table, his silent mornings, his name feared by thousands and truly known by almost no one. No, he said, it made me unreachable. Mara's eyes softened. But just when peace seemed possible, the final secret emerged. It began with a photograph. Eli had been moved to a recovery room. He was stronger, laughing more, asking for real food instead of hospital soup. Adrian arrived one afternoon with a stack of books and found Mara asleep in a chair. A folder had slipped from her lap, scattering papers across the floor. Adrian bent to gather them. He meant not to look. But one photograph faced upward. It showed a younger Mara standing beside Daniel outside a factory gate. Daniel wore work clothes and a broad smile. Behind them, a sign displayed the name of the company that owned the plant at the time. Adrian's hand went cold. Vale Manufacturing Group. Not Vale Industries, not exactly, but close enough. His father had once told him that companies changed names the way guilty men changed coats. Adrian turned the photo over. A date was written on the back. 7 years earlier. He stood slowly. Mara woke and saw the photograph in his hand. Everything in her face changed. "You knew," Adrian said. She did not answer. "You knew my company was connected to Daniel's plant." Mara took the photograph from him. "I knew after I saw your name." "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I didn't return your money to start a war." Adrian stared at her. The room suddenly felt too small. "Mara." She looked away. "Tell me." For a long moment, she was silent. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, but her hands held the photograph like it was the last piece of a life stolen from her. Daniel reported safety problems for months, faulty equipment, ignored warnings, pressure to keep production moving. After the accident, the company offered a settlement if I signed papers saying no one was at fault. Adrian felt sick. "Did you sign?" "I had a baby with a heart condition and funeral bills I couldn't pay." Her eyes met his. "So yes." Adrian turned toward the window. Outside, the city moved as if nothing had happened. Cars, people, lights, business as usual. How many tragedies had passed beneath corporate language? How many families had been paid to disappear? How many signatures had men like him accepted without asking what grief stood behind them? "I didn't know," he said. "I believe you." That surprised him. "But not knowing doesn't erase it," she added. "No." He could barely hear his own voice. "That day I returned your briefcase," Mara said. "I thought about keeping it. Not for me, for Eli, for the bills, for all the things your world took from mine and called legal." Adrian closed his eyes. "But then Eli asked what we should do," she continued, "and I heard myself almost say something that would have made sense, something practical, something everyone would understand." "What?" She swallowed. "I almost said, maybe life owes us this." Adrian turned back to her. "But I didn't want my son to learn that pain gives us permission to become dishonest, so I returned it." The room went silent. That was the unimaginable thing. Not merely that she had returned money she needed. Not merely that she had returned money to a man connected to her suffering. But that she had chosen honesty while standing face to face with a world that had not been honest with her. Adrian sat down heavily. For years, he had believed rich men were powerful because they could afford choices. Mara had shown him something different. True power was making the right choice when life had made every wrong choice understandable. "What do you want from me?" he asked. Mara's answer came slowly. "The truth." He looked up. "Not a donation," she said. "Not a quiet payment. Not your guilt dressed up as generosity. I want the truth about what happened at that plant. For Daniel, for Eli, for every family that signed papers because they were too tired or too scared to fight." Adrian nodded. The old Adrian would have calculated risk. The new Adrian did not need to. "You'll have it," he said. The investigation took 4 months. This time Adrian did not delegate it and look away. He sat in meetings, he read reports, he questioned former managers, he reopened archived complaints, he hired independent safety experts and gave them full access. What they found was worse than he feared. Warnings ignored. Maintenance delayed. Production prioritized. Employees pressured into silence. After Daniel's death, the company had restructured, renamed divisions, and buried responsibility beneath layers of legal language. Adrian had not ordered the cover-up. He had not even known Daniel's name. But the empire he inherited and expanded had profited from a culture where people at the bottom paid for decisions made at the top. When the final report landed on his desk, Adrian looked at it for nearly an hour before opening it. Cole stood nearby. "You don't have to make all of it public," Cole said quietly. "Legally, there are ways to handle this." Adrian thought of Mara in the diner. He thought of Eli's drawing. He thought of his father at the kitchen table. Then he opened the report. "Yes," he said, "I do." The press conference shocked the city. Adrian Vale stood before cameras and did something no one expected from a billionaire famous for control. He admitted fault. Not personal intent, not a carefully polished apology without responsibility. He acknowledged that companies under his umbrella had failed workers, hidden complaints, and protected profits over people. He announced compensation funds for affected families, independent oversight for all industrial operations, and the reopening of old cases. Reporters shouted questions. Stocks dipped. Board members panicked. Lawyers sweated. But Mara, watching from the back of the room with Eli beside her, remained still. Adrian did not mention her name. He had promised not to make her a symbol without permission. When the conference ended, he walked past executives, cameras, and security until he reached her. "It's done," he said. Mara looked at him for a long time. "No," she said softly, "it started." He nodded. She was right. The months that followed were difficult. Adrian lost partnerships. Some investors withdrew. Old friends stopped calling, though he realized most had never been friends at all. Lawsuits came. Criticism came. People accused him of weakness, strategy, guilt, performance. But something else came too. Former workers came forward. Families received answers. Policies changed. A safety foundation was created in Daniel Bennett's name, not as charity, but as correction. Mara agreed to serve on its advisory board only after insisting that workers and families hold real decision-making power. Adrian agreed. Eli recovered slowly, not perfectly, not magically. Real life does not heal on command, but he grew stronger. He returned to school part-time. He drew constantly. Sometimes he drew buildings, sometimes bridges. Once he drew a huge heart with tiny workers repairing it from the inside. Mara framed that one. On the anniversary of the day Mara returned the briefcase, Adrian stood again in the lobby lounge where it had all begun. The furniture had changed. The briefcase was long gone. People hurried past, carrying coffee, phones, worries, ambitions. Mara arrived with Eli a few minutes late. "I almost didn't come," she said. "I assumed." "Then why wait?" Adrian smiled faintly. "I'm learning patience." Eli looked up. "You're still not very good at it." "No," Adrian said, "I'm not." They walked outside together. Across the street, the building where Mara once cleaned offices was being renovated. Not into luxury apartments, but into a community training center with childcare, legal aid, and job placement programs funded by penalties recovered from the lending investigation and matched by Vale Industries. Mara had helped design it. At the entrance, a small plaque waited beneath a cloth. A crowd gathered. Adrian had offered to name the center after Daniel. Mara refused. "Daniel deserves to be remembered," Adrian had said. "He will be," Mara replied, "but this place should not belong to one pain. It should belong to everyone trying to survive without losing themselves." So the plaque read, "The Bennett Bridge Center. For families who need more than charity. For workers who deserve more than silence. For every honest person who has ever been told honesty is not enough. Mara read it and said nothing. But her eyes shone. Adrian looked at her. Is it acceptable? She nodded. It's a start. He had come to understand that from Mara, those words were almost praise. During the opening ceremony, Eli was asked to cut the ribbon. He took the scissors with great seriousness. Cameras flashed. People clapped. Mara placed a hand on his shoulder. Before cutting, Eli turned to Adrian. Are you happy now? The question caught him off guard. Adrian looked at the center, at Mara, at the families waiting to enter, at the city that had once seemed like a game board and now looked like thousands of fragile, important lives crossing one another in ways no balance sheet could measure. I think, Adrian said slowly, I'm becoming happy. Eli considered this. That's good, he said, and cut the ribbon. Everyone applauded. Later, after the crowd thinned, Mara found Adrian standing near the entrance. You know, she said, I still think you were terrible for following me. I know. And arrogant. Yes. And controlling. I'm aware. But she paused, and he turned toward her. You changed. Adrian looked down. No, he said, you reminded me. Of what? He looked across the street, where people moved through the city with their own private burdens, most unseen, most unspoken. That I was poor before I was powerful, that my father was kind before he was broken, that money can protect a man's body while starving his soul, and that honesty is not foolish just because the world rewards lies. Mara said nothing for a while. Then she smiled. This time, Adrian let himself smile back. Years later, people would retell the story in different ways. Some said a billionaire changed because a woman returned his money. Some said a single mother exposed a hidden injustice. Some said a child's drawing softened a man no one thought could be reached. All of those versions were partly true. But the deeper truth was this: Mara Bennett did not save Adrian Vale by accepting his help. She saved him by refusing to let him confuse help with control. She forced him to see that generosity without humility was just another form of power. And Adrian did not save Mara by writing checks. He honored her by finally telling the truth, even when the truth cost him something. As for the $100,000, Adrian eventually placed it in a glass case inside the Bennett Bridge Center, not as a display of wealth, but as a reminder. Beneath it was a small inscription written by Mara herself. The money was never the miracle. The choice was. And every person who passed by stopped for a moment. Some wondered what they would have done. Some were certain. Some became uncomfortable because certainty is easy until temptation has weight, until bills are overdue, until a child is sick, until life whispers that one wrong thing might fix everything. But that was the power of Mara's story. It did not ask whether honesty was easy. It asked whether honesty was still possible when it was hard. And somewhere in the city, in a modest apartment now filled with drawings, homework, warm meals, and cautious hope, Mara Bennett tucked her son into bed. "Mom," Eli asked. "Yes. Do you think Dad knows?" Mara sat beside him. "Knows what?" "That we're okay." She looked at the photograph on the bedside table, Daniel smiling, young and alive in the only way photographs can keep people. "Yes," she whispered, "I think he knows." Eli closed his eyes. Mara turned off the lamp and stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him sleep. She had returned $100,000 because it was not hers. But in doing so, she had reclaimed something that had always belonged to her. Her dignity, her voice, her future. And without meaning to, she had returned something to Adrian Vale too. His humanity. Dear viewers, what do you think truly defines a person's character? what they do when life is easy, or what they choose when life gives them every excuse to do wrong. Would you have returned the money if you were in Mara's position? Share your thoughts in the comments, because your answer may reveal more than you expect. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe, share it with someone who believes kindness still matters, and turn on the notification bell for more powerful and interesting stories like this.